Hey everyone, thank you for joining me. This is episode 8, and this is another video spurred on by a comment. And Lisa Brooks was the friend of ours that left the comment. I'm just going to skip kind of most of her comment and read just the questions. Are you finding your houses on the MLS, or do you just happen upon them? 2, do you offer full asking price every time, or do you negotiate if there's something significant wrong with the house? 3, do you use an agent or do you make the offer yourself? 4, do you bother with a home inspection or pretty much know what to look for? I did a very lengthy response, which in one of my several attempts to film this video, I read the whole thing, but I think I will skip that and then just use that to go on this. What's on my board? So one thing I don't want to do is make these videos too painful for myself, because what happens is I get on a roll, I say some good stuff, and then I say one awkward thing, and I'm like, I can't keep that. And I'll start a whole video over, and these things are 20 to 30 minutes long each, so that can be very painful when it's 2 hours later, and, and I don't want to edit these all up either. I just want to be able to post them. So we're just going to keep on rolling. It's well after midnight. Family's upstairs asleep, so I can't keep screaming in the basement. I am tucked over into a corner in case I start giggling or anything, but let's continue. Number 1, common methods equal common results. I'm saying that because in that comment, everything she was asking was kind of like a little too ordinary, just a standard way of going about things. And when I responded to her, I told her I giggled a little about her comment, just in that she was looking for some sort of secret answer to the question, but then introduced sort of these like really normal ways to go about things. So basically no to all of her questions, and I called myself a swamp lizard in the response, meaning that I'm just like some creature crawling around in a swamp finding little things to eat here and there. And that's sort of what I think about myself as far as finding these houses. I have to do uncommon methods to get these uncommon results that you hear about. I've said this before in other videos. A lot of people are thinking that because I buy a $9,000 house that I'm living in some ghetto trashy neighborhood where I'm going to catch a bullet and getting robbed every other day. But that's not the case. The price that I'm buying these houses for isn't the value of the house. All these houses are worth probably 2 or 3 or 4, 5 times more than I'm paying for them right off the bat. And that's just because of the way I'm going about things, all of what's on this board. I'm not going to go into every last little detail in my response to her. I gave her a nice big response. You can go look for her comment. It's in the rental property, how much profit. Again, her name was Lisa Brooks. It's a little picture of her, looks like holding a kid on the beach. Mostly blue, if you want to try to search for it. In that comment, I mentioned my ebook, and that goes into the very specifics of how I find places, giving actual examples of, I think, 4 or 5 of the houses that I've bought, and then other ideas that I've done as well that maybe weren't directly related to buying a house, but just methods that I've tried. Just for example, mentioning, do I find houses on the MLS? Obviously not. These houses that I'm buying, they're not even for sale usually when I find them. It's some sort of a weird situation going on. I kind of sense an opportunity in there. Somebody's got an issue, and I go in, I convince that person to sell the house if I can solve their problem. And then because I can solve a problem, they're happy to let me do that. And then for that reason, I get a good deal. So that's why I'm just saying this. If you go about things the normal way, if you're looking in real estate listings, even Craigslist is as sophisticated as you should get if you're looking for a really good deal. I say sophisticated. I'm sure there's people way smarter figuring weird things out to find super cheap places in some sort of a high-tech way. But for me, it comes down to sometimes just driving around in my car really slow, with now I have a smartphone. I've only had one for a couple years, maybe a year really, and I will just look up each house on city records and then try to kind of like figure out, do I think that house is abandoned? Is something weird going on? Are the owners from out of state? Is the grass tall and no cars in the driveway? Or is a car in the driveway got flat tires? I'm just trying to perceive, what could be going on, and then I'll try to figure out how to contact that person. And you would be surprised what you can make happen doing stuff like this. That you would tell somebody something like that and they'll go roll their eyes and say, well, something like that's not going to work. How do you think people like me are doing stuff? You're not using common methods, because that's just going to get common results. When I buy a house, say it's $10,000, it can be worth, anywhere between $30,000 and $50,000 usually. So if somebody went about things commonly, they're going to probably at least pay $30,000 or $50,000 for some of these houses I'm buying. And a lot of times it could be even more, just because all the variables involved. But so that is sort of an example of number one. You've got to go about things differently. And one thing I think that a lot of people watching these videos are going to have is you don't know what you don't know. Meaning that you don't know this big list of stuff that you're not familiar with. So you can enter into this, and you might just do things use uncommon methods because you don't know what to do at all, so you start making stuff up. And that's where you get kind of creative and figure out some weird stuff. Another thing that I feel like sometimes people have convinced themselves is they want to be this real estate mogul, and they think that they need to know everything in the world and find all of the houses they're ever going to own at one time. But you just need to find one house. That's all. One single house. And once you buy that house, you're going to be swamped getting it ready to rent it or sell it. So don't get hung up. The finding the house and everything, that's the quick part. Sometimes I can put in a good amount of time into actually acquiring a place, but it's nothing compared to what goes into it long term. So don't get all hung up on finding, knowing how to find houses really all that much, because you just need to find one. So just start looking, talk to people, talk to your aunts and your uncles, talk to your grandmother's neighbors, whatever the situation is. Things snowball. Just start doing something. I think that's the easiest thing to do. Until you start doing something, you're going to be kind of playing in a vacuum. As soon as you start talking to some people, something will bust loose, and you don't even need to know what's going to cause that. Just start doing something, whether it's just driving around, mailing random people things, offering to buy their houses, posting some sort of flyers up here and there, make some business cards that say something about that you're looking for a house and put them in some gas stations. Whatever it is, you just need to do some stuff like that, and then something will happen. Number two, be a problem solver. So every house that I'm buying has got some sort of major problem normally. Even the houses that I buy just straight up in a more normal way, like if it was just posted on Craigslist and I bought it, usually there's still some sort of an issue. In those cases, usually it's a rough house, and I'm calling me being a problem solver, just being okay with its condition. But that's not really what I'm talking about here. In the comment response to Lisa Brooks, one thing that I mentioned was that one of the houses that I bought was still in the name of someone that died in the early 70s. So I think it was 1972, I believe. The woman that owned it had died, and they never did any kind of the deed work to get that transferred to her next of kin or heir or whatever you want to call it. Since then, that woman, that it's still in her name, her daughter had died. And then the person who I say owned it, but again, she didn't technically legally own it. She was just in the list of heirs. She was much older. Things like that can get extremely complicated. And then also that person lived out of state. So you're starting to add up all of these potential issues, and that may seem bad, but when you're the person looking for something, that's where, you're falling into being a problem solver. So that is where I think this is where the deal is made for me. You can find houses all day long, but you've got to be able to solve people's problems, because most houses that are going to be bought at super cheap deals, there's issues that need to be fixed, and before you can get to the actual closing and buy places. So in her case, I created that opportunity for that person to actually even be able to sell that house. And it involved the coolest part of that whole deal was, I say coolest, I mean that loosely in an abstract way, but is I had to figure out the list of heirs. So I had to talk with this older woman that owned the house. Again, she lives out of state, or Again, she didn't own it yet. I had to get it in her name to where she could even sell it. And I paid for all this stuff too, so that's what I tell somebody right up front. Don't worry, I'll pay for it all. Because if I see, I'm not just focused on how much I want to offer for that house. I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to offer $5,000 for the house. There'll be about $3,000 worth of legal stuff to solve and closing costs and, so forth. So I'm looking into, like, I'll have about $13,500 in this deal, and it's worth $50,000, so it'll be something like that. So even if I had to spend $10,000 to a lawyer to figure something out, I'm still so far under how much I could just turn and sell a place for, I don't care. And I get that deal because I'm solving these problems. And we're going to talk about the negotiating aspect because it kind of ties into the problem solver. But in that situation, I had to figure out the list of heirs, and I talked with her. I got everybody involved in her family that was beyond the woman that it was in her name, and then figured out where the different people that had passed away were buried. And I literally went to the graveyard. It was probably, 3,000 to 5,000 graves, and none of it was, it wasn't alphabetical or anything like that. They had some sort of an organization, but it was an older graveyard, so it was all mixed up. And I ran around in this graveyard, literally running through the graveyard, and I didn't, I know it may sound disrespectful and somebody think that this is all so nutty sounding, but that's just what I did. It would have taken me so long to just walk through it. And I told this woman what I was going to do. I said, I need to go to the graveyard and I need to take pictures of these graves if I can find them. And she didn't know where they were. And even if she did, she's out of state telling me over the phone, in a graveyard. So I just ran around in a graveyard just doing this, running up and down. I probably ran, no joke, it was probably several miles, without stopping, just looking at these gravestones. And I found 2 of them, took pictures of them, and then that was used as, proof of death, if that's what it's called. So that was a couple of them, and then I had to go into one of the funeral homes that had the record of this person. Some of the other people dying had completely gone out of business, but then I found out where all of their records went, and their records went to a different cemetery, which also keeps up with all kinds of local historical stuff. And then they had luckily at some point not too long ago had digitized all this stuff and scanned God knows how many files, and then they were able to produce me the death certificates of these other people. So one thing people are hearing this stuff right now probably thinking, they're like, how in the world does this boy know how to do all this stuff? Well, I didn't. Somebody just told me. I just took it one thing at a time. In the work I do on houses or here in my shop making a piece of furniture, people will get kind of, they'll look at the big picture when you just need to think about things as individual steps. I say any kind of complicated process is just a series of really simple steps. Even if it is, like say you're doing some huge thing and, you need to pick the hammer up first. Then pick up a nail, hold the nail up, drive the nail in. That could be, that's part of building an entire house. But that isolated step is simple. And I know I may be exaggerating this a little bit, but that's really what it comes down to with this stuff too. I talk with the person, I figure out the whole big picture. What are they going to be okay with? What do I want out of it? And then I present that to the real estate attorney, and I go, how do we get this done? They tell me, usually they're going to do a lot of it, and then I'm doing some legwork, literally like running around in a graveyard or going somewhere else and, getting people to look stuff up. And it's just one thing leads to another. It's like a detective doing something. He's not having some big epiphany that tells him everything about the whole case at once. He's just, you get a hunch about something, you get a lead, you go figure this out. That leads to the next thing, and then before you know it, and sometimes it's so much quicker and easier than you think. Sometimes it's a lot harder. An hour later, you're holding a death certificate, and it's mind-blowing. I had another deal where from the time I found out that a house was going to be sold at a tax auction to the time I spoke with the owner for the first time ever And then by the time I signed the contract was all within like, I want to say it was like 4 or 5 hours. Oh no, it was. I found out the issue later that day. I talked to a family member of theirs, tracked them down. He contacted the person. The owner called me up. I spoke with him and then got in a car and immediately drove to where he was and talked with him and got him to sign a contract to sell a house because it was a very time-sensitive situation. But he talked to me at like 10 a.m. and by like 12:30 or 1, a contract was signed. So sometimes you blow it out of proportion because you don't need to make any assumptions, basically. Just go into stuff just going, okay, I'm going to just put in the work and we're going to see what happens. So don't get in your way thinking anything about stuff that you don't even know what's going to happen, basically. So that kind of falls into this problem-solving stuff of you don't need to know a lot to solve problems. You just need to just start and figure it out. And just don't stop till it's done. And done means the deal's over, it's just not going to happen, or you close on the house and you buy it. And I'm saying all this talking about, making a deal and buying a house, but this could be anything. This could be anything in life, any kind of challenges. You can approach it almost this way. Number 3, negotiate. This and this don't have to, it's not so much dealing with the person. This, you're dealing with the person's issues, but that might not be face-to-face with them. This could be me working with a real estate attorney, a closing agent, running around in the graveyard, going different places, trying to find certain records. But the actual negotiating, the one-on-one time that you're going to have with a person, this is extremely important. This is probably your most important thing. This happens. Houses are going to find you if you're looking for them. This, you just have to be a person who isn't going to be stopped by a roadblock. You just got to figure something out. This is where some skill building will occur over time. This is where certain people, like when y'all are watching me in these videos and you're like, he's just some good old country boy. This is where the good old country boy helps me. Whereas I might not be very good in the boardroom, although I've dealt with higher situations before and I've done okay with those as well. I can adapt to whatever it is that I'm doing with relative ease, as long as I kind of have a little time to think about it, basically. But when it comes to negotiating with people, this is the area I think would be the most, I would feel most self-conscious talking to on camera. And the reason that I had to stop filming several of them, because I felt like I said stuff in a way that would be interpreted the wrong way. So basically, keep in mind when you're watching this, if you're a beginner, when you're hearing these things that I'm saying, is you're not knowledgeable in this stuff. So don't make assumptions based on kind of like not being in the game. It would be like walking in some sort of a butcher shop, or any kind of a rough occupation, not having any experience in it and just seeing it or hearing the details about something. You've kind of got to get involved in something for a while before you can kind of form some sort of, I think, really valid opinion on it. And when you're negotiating with somebody, I think that's one of them. Otherwise, you're just going to think somebody's taking advantage of somebody and manipulating them in some way. You're taking advantage of situations. That might not mean you're specifically taking advantage of a person. In a lot of my situations, these houses that I'm buying, I am taking advantage of a sad situation oftentimes, or just somebody in a tight spot. But I'm also solving a problem for them and creating an opportunity for them to either get out of a problem they've caused themselves, or creating an opportunity for them to sell a house that they otherwise could not have sold for some reason, like it's in your great-grandmother's name still that died in 1970. So into negotiating. Establish a low value without insulting the person. This is sort of for 2 reasons. You don't want to insult a person telling them that their house is crap, because oftentimes their house has gone to crap because they've let it go to crap. Let it have gone to crap. And then also, so you can make the person, you can just make them feel bad. And a lot of times it's a sentimental thing, like it's a grandmother's house, but then the person who's responsible for it now is older. So they really can't take care of it themselves, might not have the money, but they still feel bad for it, that they let this family home place get in bad shape. The other thing is, if you are all like super excited about buying some house, but then you're like talking really, really bad about it, the person's going to be like, well, if it's in such awful condition, why is it you want it so bad? If it's stupid, they're going to think you're up to something. So we're going to get down to here to be honest with it. I think really in establishing its low value, how I did it with that particular house that I've been referencing is I basically I just tell it like it is. I go, well, currently the house is tax assessed for this, but it's going to need a new roof. The entire outside needs to have some issues addressed and repainted. The whole inside's going to be gutted. It needs a new electrical system. It needs this. 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 And I'll kind of overwhelm somebody with the truth. And this is where people are going to maybe think you're being a little rough on somebody. But this also really saves time, and I think in the end it makes the person trust you because you just lay it all out for them. You don't sound like some little shyster pulling something over on somebody. And then what I'll do oftentimes is sometime around now I've probably made them some sort of an offer, but the first thing I do is I tell them exactly what the house is, and I'll say, even if you gave me this house, I'll say something like this, even if you gave me this house, in order to fix this place up to be sold like a normal house, there's probably $50,000, $60,000, $75,000 worth of work if I paid somebody to do it all. I say that, and then I'll tell the person, I said, but I'm probably going to do a lot of the work myself to save money. I said, but for doing that, that's why my offer is low, because I'm accounting for that type of a thing. And then, so you can say stuff like that, and you just really lay it out there. Now, I may end up doing the work and doing it for a lot less, whatever the case is. But just establish that value, be honest about it, and just don't do it in some way that you're like, I don't know why anybody would let this happen to a house like this. Be understanding with it. Tell them you understand how this can happen, because it's easy. I've got 7 or 8 houses right now, and I've got different houses that need some things done. It's hard to keep up with them all. So in the case of this woman, she lives hours and hours away in a different state. She's older. She has limited, money to probably deal with her own life, much less some house that's not even in her name where I'm at. 2, this is no particular order on this stuff, really. Hear the person out. Just listen to the person sometimes. A lot of times people, when it comes to these houses, everybody's always just giving them crap about places. They're just, when are you going to do something about that? Blah, 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 blah. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll ask the person the history about the house. Who built it? Did you spend a lot of time there? Did you just kind of let the person tell you all those positive things about the place, and then in that, wherever it goes, whatever they tell you is what they tell you. So I think that kind of alleviates that pressure of you're like some salesman there, trying to pull something on them. In the end, yes, I am trying to buy a house from them, but that doesn't mean that you have to come in there and leave them with some awful taste in their mouth when you're done with them. So hear that person out. The power of silence. Doesn't sound like something I'd be very good at, running my mouth right now. When I'm talking to somebody and I'm making an offer, or you get to this like point where some real negotiating really starts to happen, I keep my talking to the minimum. I kind of think about it before I go into something. Usually I get kind of like nervous right before I call somebody. So I call somebody else and I kind of run by what I'm going to say, and then I call the real person. So that may sound kind of amateur, but that really helps for me, because it kind of like, sometimes I won't say you feel self-conscious about what you're about to do, but like you can just be excited about it, nervous about it, you really want it to happen, feel like you got a lot on the line, so it helps to just kind of say some of this stuff and take some of that excitement out on someone else to where you can approach that person calmer. But be concise with what you're saying, but just try to talk to them kind of normal, and then after you say something, just stop and wait for that person to respond. A lot of times, I think what people do is they'll get to the end of saying something, and there needs to be some response coming back from the other person. And if you don't hear their response back like instantly, the person who started talking just has this urge to kind of like further explain themselves. And that can get kind of jumbled up, make you sound like you don't know what you're talking about and so forth. So I say, when you get to the end of what you're saying, and you go, I'm going to offer you $8,500 for the house. Just be quiet and just let that person sit there and think about it, even if it gets a little awkward. I mean, maybe you've lost connection, so if you're waiting 15 minutes, you might want to say hello. But let those pauses happen. And those pauses, I think, are in your benefit. It makes it look like you're not trying to convince the person of anything. You're just making the offer, you're telling them the information, and then you wait for their response. I also think it's kind of the respectful thing to do, to not just talk somebody to death in these deals. I'm going to come back to that one. Now I'll just go ahead and say it. This is usually the last thing. This is your nuclear thing. In negotiating, you can always walk away. And if you walk away, you basically just showed the person that you're serious about whatever it is you've said. The limitations of what your offer is, you're laying that down there. And if you walk away from it, doesn't mean the deal's over. It just means you've walked away for now and you've said, well, that's as far as I can go. Other opportunities. This kind of plays into walk away. With other opportunities, you can basically tell the person, and this is true. Usually I'm looking at a couple things at once, so I'll tell the person that I've got X amount of money to spend. I've got a few houses that I'm looking for, and I'm looking to buy something within the next week or two. And you just tell them that. And then all of a sudden it switches this whole thing from you trying to get their house from them trying to get your money. So I think that's always a good way to kind of flip things, is to make them feel like they're competing for for your money that you would buy their house with, because you might just go off and buy the house from someone else. But that's after you've already basically explained that you can solve all these problems. You haven't done all this yet. This is just sort of saying you've done all this. You've established its value. You've heard them out. You've basically told them you're going to take care of everything, and then they are then informed, that I'm going to be doing something, whether it's buy this house or buy a different house, but I need to go ahead and move on something quick. And that's kind of pushing it towards signing a contract and getting it done. And again, you're still going to let that person make their mind up, but it's just, if you just tell this person, get back with me in a few months, the deal's over. Something's going to happen. Someone else will get to them. They'll get excited about selling it, and then they'll do something bigger, get hooked up with somebody, a real estate agent, or it'll end up in a tax auction. That person's, out of the loop at that point. Sorry, I'm watching my time here, making sure I don't run over. 100% honesty, I think that's just the best way to go. Again, that's not just me, being high and mighty. If you're honest, and you're always honest, you're not going to end up saying the wrong thing, basically. And if you say the wrong thing, it's an honest mistake. But if you start trying to get too fancy with stuff and making stuff up and lying about how you're going about stuff and whatever it is, even if it's not a lie straight up, but you know what I'm talking about, just getting too exaggerating, I think just being honest really helps. And the other thing is, don't let up. If you let up on something, I'm not saying badger somebody, but don't let too much time go by. When I bought that house, I called that person, and I didn't get a response for like the first week or two after I left a message on it. And I was real self-conscious about calling back, but I was like, no, I can't not call back. And I called back, and then the woman did pick up, and then she was apologizing to me for not calling me back, even though I'm a stranger, leaving a message on her answering machine. So at first I didn't want to, but then I did, and she apologized to me for not calling me back. So all the way through the whole process, just don't let up. It would be like you're in a fight and you just start to get beat up a little bit, and if you just gave up, you're going to get your completely beat if you give up halfway through something. None of this stuff is easy. And again, we're back to this. If it was easy, you wouldn't have the opportunity to do the deal because somebody else would have done it. So a lot of times that's what it comes down to, is you're basically just willing to do work that other people are not willing to do, and won't just persist through the whole process. So that is my take on how I get good deals. If you want more details, check out my book. The link will be in the description below. Also, if you're not familiar with my other channel, Homemade Home, check out that channel. I think that's probably pretty much it. I would appreciate a thumbs up on this video. Leave a comment letting me know what topics you'd like to hear covered next. And then I'd also like to kind of branch out from talking about real estate stuff. I know that is the main draw here on this channel so far, but I would like to touch on some other things. But in the meantime, I don't mind talking about this. It's one of my favorite things. The memory card got me there at the end. I hope there's not too big of a jump in the video. Check the links in the description below. Click the thumbs up button if you're enjoying the videos. Leave a comment, let me know what you'd like to talk about next. And I think that about covers it. Thank you for watching. See you next time.